everybody. Welcome to another show. This is going to be a very special one again. This is Victor Sotomayor, for those that don't know me. And for those that don't know Brandon Hammerli, I actually have we have become friends recently, actually through Facebook, through mutual open mics that we've been through. And basically, I just want to introduce Brandon, who is actually a very humble poet that we actually met. We actually met at Corazón del Pueblo, if I remember correctly. It was about a couple months ago. And it was actually a very special moment because there was actually one performer that went before us or after me. There was another person that went after me who actually happened to I'd never seen anybody perform like her before. And we actually have basically we talk afterwards too. I don't know if you remember Brandon. We spoke about this performer and how it touched both our lives, because she spoke about a very deep, very dark moment in her life, and everybody has gone through those moments in our lives. And I don't know why I'm so nervous, and I must admit it, that coming into this show today, I have something very, everybody has a dark moment, everybody has a dark secret, and I guess that's what this show is about. It's just how poetry it heals, but it also is, hurts at the same time. You have to search within yourself. I was talking to a friend of mine earlier today, and how we have to search within, and how sometimes we have to uncover something that is very painful in order to recover from it. So, well, without further ado, I just want to introduce Brandon Hammerli, who is in the line right now, and that's been very patient. And here it is, Brandon Hammerli.
Hello, Victor. It's good to hear your voice again and be acquainted again. And thank you for having me on.
You're welcome.
I definitely agree that that's a function of poetry, I guess you could say, is to get those dark moments out and to get them out in words. It's painful, but it's good for you. Ultimately, that's why we go to open mics, right?
Yep. And it was actually we actually only saw each other once, but ever since we became friends on Facebook, and we've been communicating back and forth. I don't know what it is, but as poets, we actually have this connection, really strong connection. And I've seen you're always out and about. You're always out, and you're always rock climbing, adventure. You're always in nature, and you're actually one of the persons that it was really easy to take the pictures. You have amazing pictures on your profile. I'm like, this guy's amazing.
Thank you.
You have this amazing eye for. I want to describe this one picture that you have where I think it's in Utah. I'm not really sure, but it actually has this landscape that it looks so alien to me.
Yeah,
and
that
you're just sitting there.
It is in it is in Utah, and the landscape. The best way to describe it is like it looks like Mars. When you're there, the rock is red, and there's lines in the rock, and it's a pretty unique place. There's nowhere else really like it. The stone is shaped in a certain way. It's actually called the wave, and because it looks like a wave, when you're there, it's like a wave of rocks. It's a pretty remarkable place. Yeah.
And you're just there meditating. You're just like observing it. I don't know how to describe it, but I just picture that place being such a great spot to write a science fiction or maybe something otherworldly, because it's like, wow, just to be there.
Inspiring. Yeah. being places like that is really, it's an inspiring thing. That's why I love going to places like that, particularly ones that are deep in the wilderness, because it's an adventure to get there. But then once you get to a place like that, it brings out things in you that you didn't know were there. Because when you see incredible nature like that, it's just a whole different kind of inspiration. So I try to seek out those type of places.
Great. And so, yeah, and actually I just happened to come home today, and then I'm reading some of the poetry that they actually are going to be reading tonight, and I just like to know what is your inspiration, like what inspires you to write these pieces, do you have any particular idea before you begin writing, or you just whatever comes to your mind, or what is your state of mind when you're writing these pieces?
For me, I never usually sit down with the intention to write. And normally I'm just, I'll feel inspired all of a sudden. And I always walk around with a notebook in my pocket. I try to never go anywhere without a pen and a notebook, which is funny because anytime you're somewhere, someone goes, anybody have a pen? Like, I always have a pen, So I would say I'm inspired at certain moments, and then I'll pull out my notebook and I'll start writing and get a few ideas down. And then maybe later that night I'll sit down and I'll write more. But as far as certain topics or anything like that, it's not usually a certain topic. It's usually whatever I'm experiencing at that moment. So, I mean, I've written about my own struggles. I've written about being a teacher. I've written about being in nature. I've written about a lot of different things, but it's always whatever I'm going through. For a long time, I used poetry to express what I was feeling, and sort of a way to put the pieces together and connect the dots in whatever I was experiencing. And so I would just write it out, and a lot of times it rhymed, and a lot of times it sounded really cool, and then I started to go up and perform it, and people always received me very well, and I got a lot of praise for the stuff that I wrote. But recently I haven't been writing as much. I know you go to open mics like many times a week. You're I think you've described yourself as an open mic whore, and I am kind of the opposite. I'm sort of the opposite, where like I'm an open mic hermit. I don't show up very often, and but every time I do, it's a whole nother level of inspiration, and I can't wait to go back every time I go. So what inspires me is just whatever I go through and writing it down. But it's definitely not easy. Sometimes I can't write, and I wish I could. So
right.
you move with it. You move with it. When the pen wants to move, it'll move.
Right. And I must say that your pieces are really, I mean, you grab my attention from the first, on one of them in particular, which is titled "For Her to Be Heard." For her to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
The first sentence is just like, yeah.
Nice.
And I was describing this to a friend of mine. I was describing this particular piece to a friend of mine, and just the first sentence, and she's like, "Victor, stop it!" Like, we started like tearing up.
Wow.
as we're just talking about it. And would you like to read it? How do you want to start? I don't know if you want to start with that one.
Fine.
Or
yeah, I'm happy to read that one first, and then I'm probably going to change it up a little bit on you, because I think I want to read one that's a little happier and a little like uplifting, because I got a lot of deep ones or heavy ones, and so after this one I'll do one that's actually about my time in Utah, and I'll do that one later. But this one, to give it a little background, this was the first time I ever worked in a classroom. This was, I don't know how many years ago now. I think 3 years ago now. And it's just about one of my students. And, it was hard for me to process all that I was experiencing, because a lot of my students have been through some pain that I had never been through, and had experienced things in their really young life that I could never even imagine going through. And so trying to mentor them and be a role model for them was difficult at times. And I think I wrote this piece just to try to deal with it. How do I start off? Just go, huh? Just start reading.
Just go. This will be the title is.
The title is, man, what is the title? I said, so that she.
For her?
Yeah, for her. For her to find her voice, I believe is the name of it. All right. I kissed him while he was laying in his casket. I finished her sentence. Yeah, she let out softly as her eyes went empty and she fell back into her chair. It was sad. A 9-year-old girl. The image, the smell, the horror of her 21-year-old cousin bleeding to death in front of her on a dirty sidewalk from a gunshot wound to the head. Her young vocabulary does not know the words to describe what she witnessed. Those big things, you know, they go boom on his chest, then they count. Yeah, nothing. I want to say defibrillator, but it doesn't matter. I just nod as tears begin to flow towards my eyes and realize that the word doesn't matter. It's the sound she heard as they zapped his chest and his body thudded back to the ground. The frozen moment, witnessed through the blur of tears, as her cousin's life escaped. That is life lived, seeing life lost, that she doesn't need words for. But I try to teach her anyway, because the two of us are sitting outside the classroom together, reading a children's book called The Life of Cesar Chavez, when she begins to tell me about these tragedies that have plagued her young life. Every word matters in this session. When we first sat, I asked her if she wanted to get better at reading, and she quickly exclaimed, "Yes, yes, I do," going on to explain that her mother hits her more when she doesn't read well. While we are reading, I make her write down all the words that she doesn't know, so she can spell them, and we talk about their meanings. This is one of those moments of divine curiosity, but two of the words that came up just minutes after sharing her story with me were violence and experience. How could I describe in my words, in that moment, the meaning of the word violence to this girl? Or to try to make her understand what it means to experience? Violence is like bad stuff, right? She questions me. Well, that's a start, I thought. See, she understands how violence feels, how violence takes away the people she loves. She understands the pain that comes from it, the fear that it gives birth to in her heart. She doesn't know how to name those bruises, what to call the blood she saw. She doesn't know what word represents all that horror she has lived. And maybe that's the way it should be. Maybe this vast array of experiences, of feelings, of tears, of lost hope, of hiding, is not meant to be summarized in one word in such a young mind. So what is the value of these words? Of teaching her how to express her voice in such words, and somehow give her these tools in the form of words that she can use to convince her 17-year-old brother not to follow in the same bloody footsteps. Maybe these words can give her some hope, so that she is no longer overwhelmed with that desperate feeling that her big brother may be taken away from her too, because he chose to live by the gun too. And her young voice had no power or influence over his decisions, just because she doesn't have powerful enough words within her to touch his heart and change his path. People often say that we should use our words as weapons, but isn't it just as important to use them to heal or to mend? Is this not the true gift of literacy? To empower, to allow children and people of all ages to finally break free of that poverty of wordlessness, so they can be gifted with the conviction that the world around them is not trapping and stagnant, but is always changing, and they can and should strive to transform it with their words, with their actions, their ideas, and their power. This is when my dear student will no longer feel like a victim of this life or an observer, but rather an important member of her family, of her classroom, of her community. because she has the words necessary for her to be heard. Thank you. I realize that's not really a poem.
I recall this when you read it. I think it was Holy Grounds.
Mm-hmm.
And you have such a way of just going through what's in your head, what's going on in your mind as well, as well as what she's experiencing, and trying to picture what she went through.
Yeah.
And that happens to me when I'm reading something so intense namely, I have a friend. We actually have a mutual friend, Jeffrey Martin, and actually we had a show about forgiveness. And what he went through as well as a child and as a 6-year-old, and what he went through, and the violence you described there, what she went through, the violence, and she being in that environment and not knowing any better, not knowing that violence is a part of her life, daily life, and she doesn't know any better. And so, how do you explain to them that that's not correct, and that's not the way you live? That's in her world. That's all she knows. So how do you explain to her that can be changed? And and the words that you're using, and how words actually are also more hurtful sometimes than the violence. And that's what Jeffrey was saying. You don't understand, Victor. When I was getting beaten and I was getting hit, the physical pain was not as hurtful as the words that were saying to me while that was taking place. But wow. It's very intense, and I have
I can say about Jeffrey,
the power of my words. Yes.
When you see Jeffrey now, he's the type of guy who is a healer, and that's how I see him. Is he can come into any room and not only be friendly and not only be a person who you want to speak with, but somebody who you can talk to for 5 minutes and feel that your wounds are healed in some way, because he just exudes that, I can see that if he's been through this violence, he's not only has he recovered from it, but he's showed so many other people how to get towards that light, and how to get to a place of healing. And that's that beautiful transformation of where you can be. And that's where I hope my student could be someday, Maybe she could have that same power to help other people heal as she gets older. That's the most we can hope for.
Yeah. So where do you teach again? I don't.
Right now,
I didn't
right now I'm
ask
working
you.
That's all good. Right now I'm working in a middle school. I'm working with mostly 7th graders, and working as a teacher assistant, and in a lot of math classes, science classes right now. I had a great year last year. I got to teach language development, which is kind of my passion. As you can see in that poem, about the words and how passionate I am about words and being a poet,
right?
All together. So my dream is to help kids and adults, anybody, but to find their voice and to let their voices be heard, whether it's through writing or making films or speaking or whatever it is, to be able to use their words for transformation and for empowering themselves. And so last year I had an amazing year where I spent, a whole school year just working with kids to express themselves in any way possible. And, it was very, very exciting, and it pushed me to go into a teacher credential program. And that's where I'm at right now, is I'm trying to get my credentials so I can become a real teacher and have my own classroom. And then from there, the sky's the limit.
There you go.
Yeah.
This actually has been, it's been an interesting year for me as well. Last year, like you said, I was hitting so many open mics, and I was being a little bit obsessed with open mics too. But
why is that? Where does that come from? I want to ask you a question. How do you get what excites you most about going to so many open mics?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Actually, and the reason actually I became I guess I became really passionate about it, is that I wasn't getting enough in one place. I wasn't getting enough, and this place is amazing too, Tia Chuchas, which is right here in Silmar.
Mm-hmm.
But it came a point where I needed more. I needed more, and I needed more people that were speaking from the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And and I needed actually different perspectives too, different, somebody that lives here in the San Fernando Valley, somebody lives in downtown LA in Boyle Heights,
Mm-hmm.
or El Sereno, name it. Every place, North Hollywood. I kept going to different places because open mics, to me, I realized that at least recently, is sort of like therapy. Well, very much like
absolutely.
Therapy. Yeah. And I have my own demons. I'm dealing with a lot of things, like everybody is, depression, anxiety, stress, daily stress, and also writer's block that we all go through as well as writers and poets. And so I just was looking for inspiration. And that particular night that I met you, actually, I was very. That was one of those moments. I was like, something really happened that night, and I can describe it with words, but I saw so many things come out that night that made me change my view of poetry and how poetry can touch, the audience. And your piece, about the cell phone was really, anyways, I don't know if I should describe it. I mean, it's better if you read it.
I can read it for you if you want. I have it right here.
That's a really fun one because it was really, it was a really light, kind of story, and it actually brought everybody back to, the story can actually be uplifting, and if you want to read it, actually that was because earlier that evening we went to a dark place. And so it was like a whoa. It was really amazing to see that though. But it was everybody I think was in tension.
If I could add to your story a little bit too, we met that first night at Corazon del Pueblo in Boyle Heights, and then I think it was 2 days later was the open mic at Holy Grounds in El Sereno. And so, you and I didn't communicate or anything, but I happened to show up with my friend Chelly, who's the girl you're talking about. You saw her that night, and I think she had a profound impact on you. And then 2 days later, I asked her to come to another open mic with me, and sure enough, you were there again, and it was just amazing. It was like 2 days in a row. We got to have the same group together and performing again and having a new experience with new people in a new place. So. And then after that night at Holy Grounds, you and I and her all had tacos together and hung out for 2 or 3 hours. We just sat in some plastic chairs and ate tacos and told stories. And I told you how much I don't like the Beatles and hurt your feelings. I thought that was really hilarious. I said something like, "Yeah, I don't really like the Beatles. Was never into the band." And you just had the look on your face like, "You got to be kidding me." And then you pull up your pant leg, and you have all the Beatles tattooed around your calf. And I thought, oh boy, here I go. What did I say? Oh man, that's funny. All right, let me read a piece for you.
I still forgive you though. That's okay.
Hey, someday I still got time, right?
Oh yeah,
can always get into new music. All right, so this piece. I don't know, it's just it was just from observations. And you're right, it is a very light piece. It's very different from any other piece I've written. It's just like a fictional piece, and it's actually inspired me, hey, maybe I should write a fictional book someday. This is the first thing I've ever written like that. So it goes like this. A group of young people are sitting around a fire pit on a calm summer night. It's silent. There's a flickering orange glow on their faces from the fire that's in front of them. But there's also a bright white light from an artificial source that is shining upon their faces. Each person is engulfed in a digital cellular world. Suddenly, the silence is broken, with a large cracking sound coming from the fire. As everyone is snapped back to reality, they see an iPhone sitting in the center of the hot embers. The plastic edges are beginning to melt, and the glass is shattered. Suddenly, another phone flies into the fire and lands beside the first one. Engulfed by the pulsating heat, it begins to melt away, burning into oblivion. There is now a rain of phones falling into the fire pit, as each person around the circle tosses their addictions into the flames. There is an almost hypnotic mad laughter in the air as the fire rises higher, and everyone in the circle scoots their chairs backwards to shield from the intense heat. And as they resettle into their new spots in their chairs, they begin to turn to one another with the most innocent smiles and say, "Hi." Yeah, that's a
love
fun
it. I actually, it's funny because I was actually talking to a friend earlier, Magdalena, and I mentioned being dependent on the cell phone and the iPhone in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And I have so many things going on. She's like, how do you deal with, you have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you're doing all these different things, and I'm like, you know what, Magdalena, a year ago I wouldn't have been involved in so many things as I am today.
Yeah.
It is overwhelming.
Yeah, it can be. Well, and to me, it can be distracting. It's definitely a good thing in some ways. It's beneficial, but I think what I see, and where this came from was I literally was looking at that as when I wrote this. I was around a fire pit. You were having a party here at my house, and there was a fire pit, and everyone sitting around a circle. If you think about a fire pit, that's like a very social environment. That's where everybody would normally be sitting around and talking and having a good time, laughing, telling stories. But instead, I looked, and there was like 6 or 7 people sitting in a circle, and every single one of them was on their phone, not looking at each other. I thought, this is madness. Is there something wrong with this? This can't be a good thing. So, I mean, that's where that came from. It's the communication. You got to think about it.
Yeah, and it could be actually I see people sometimes sitting at a table. They're having a dinner, they're having a date together, or they're getting to know each other, but they're on their cell phones. And the cell phone rings, and they have to interrupt what they're doing and look at their cell phones. Yep. And I actually have an issue with that too. And well, I think everybody has that issue right now. And but I told my friend, I'm like, I was growing up in the 70s. I'm like, during the 70s, during the 80s, during half of the 90s, 25 years of my life, I didn't have a phone. I was just doing fine. One day I was going to work and I forgot my cell phone. I was about to turn away and go back to get my phone, but I was like, you know what, Victor, it's just no big deal. You've done this before. You've lived your life 25.
Yeah, all these years.
Yeah, you're fine. Yeah. You're gonna be okay. It's not a big deal. But yes, it's weird how we are so dependent on the phones and the technology and keeping up with everything and the news. It is truly overwhelming, and I think the society it's like a pandemic. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, pandemic. Yeah. I mean, it's everybody too. I mean, it's not just a few people. I mean, even my grandparents, who are obviously a different generation and grew up for many, many, many years without these things. They're still, even they, we go to Christmas and we're sitting around, and their biggest concern is help me, work on this, work on the phone and, learn how to do this and that. And I'm like, why don't we just sit and talk? Why do we have to work on the phones right now? Or why do we have to be doing this and that? But at the same time, they can get photos every day of their new great-granddaughter, that's in Arkansas, so that's a benefit of it. I can see the upside. But I mean, it's everywhere, and it's changing, I think, the way we communicate and changing the way we interact with each other, changing the way our relationships are, and not always for a positive. You know, I can definitely see the dark side of it. So hopefully that little anecdote, that little story could make people reflect and think about it.
Oh yeah, it sure does.
Yeah.
So we actually have a few more minutes. Do you want to share one more story or one more?
Sure.
You have
How
another
long do you
piece
have?
that you said you wanted to. We actually have 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay.
So.
Well, I can do the burning piece that you know, or I could do a fun one. Let's see. I think I'm going to do a fun one because,
cool. All right.
you know, both of those were a little heavy, and I wrote one. This one was kind of inspired by Dr. Seuss. I was never like a crazy Dr. Seuss fan. I'm not against Dr. Seuss. I do like Dr. Seuss, but when I was living in Utah, I worked as a park ranger for one season in 2012 out in a park called Canyonlands National Park, and I was living in the wilderness, you know, having this pretty crazy adventure. And while I was out there, I had a pretty interesting experience, and after the experience, I wrote this poem about it. And after I read it, I said, you know what? I had just been working with fourth graders right before I moved out there, and I realized that I had written this poem for fourth graders. Like, it's very obvious. You'll hear it when I read it. So, yeah, it's really fun. The name of it, I don't think I have a name for it. That's okay, right?
All right.
That's fine. So, here it goes. Backpack ready, gear loaded, excitement building, sun dropping slowly, work has ended, now play begins. Parking alone, walking alone, but so close to home. Stop worrying and start hurrying into the open grassland. Beautiful trail winding through, the dirt was wet, plants still moist, and this is when I knew this hike would be like none before, because just yesterday it had rained the whole day through. I crossed rock and sand, then canyon grand. Deeper I wander until I stand at the edge of something new. Water. Water as far as I can see. I think, here? In the desert? No way. This cannot be. But sure enough, it shines and ripples, giving life to this dry land. And in its crystal clear reflection, I see red rocks that tower high above where I stand. I am drawn to them, like bunnies to carrots. So I hurry on, and I swear, the most amazing sight to see, the plants, normally so sad and brown and dry, were as happy as could be. They were green. They were all so green. They were dancing wild and free. This rain is such a precious thing, and I'm as thankful as the trees. Just before I reach those rocks, I hear a funny buzzing. I look left and look right. What caught my ear now caught my eye. It was the four-winged dragonfly. Not one or two, but many more, like bees in a honey store. They flew in front, they flew in back, and I quickly realized this was no attack. This was a dance. And as I stood still in my spot, they zoomed and dipped and flipped a lot. I was filled with joy, and I smiled and laughed, and I knew again that this day was special after the dance of the dragonfly. So on I go to that red wall that I must climb. I know atop its jagged spine there is something I will find, and sure enough, up on the top, I saw the view, and my jaw dropped. In every direction was red rock and white rock. The sun was setting deep. The shadows, they creaked, and I was amazed. What a beautiful place. Here in this space, I have found my heaven. Wishing I could gaze for days, but I had to get going. Still needed to find my campsite, and the sun had stopped glowing. I find a spot where I will camp after an hour of walking, but as I set up my tent and stuff, the sky, it starts talking, or yelling, or roaring. Big thundering booms. I look up through the trees at black clouds spelling doom. Pack it all up and make an escape. Hurry! I have to. My life is at stake. I search left and right with all my sight, Lightning flashes all around me, and thunder sounds like big rocks after they fall. Then just up ahead in the next canyon, I spy an alcove on the wall. The wind, it blew like a train in the air, and to tell the truth, I was really scared. But despite it all, I found a roof, a shelter, a place to sit. I could finally breathe. I did not know what next would come, but at that moment, I felt relieved. The wind, it howled, the birds, they screamed, and lightning lit the sky. I leaned back in the shelter of mine and closed my tired eyes. And in that spot, my dreams would stay to end my very special day.
Yeah, awesome. That's well. You have me actually picturing every place, the way you describe everything, the red rocks. I love the dance of the dragonflies. I have a thing with dragons, anyways, and well, dragonflies. But wow, awesome. That's awesome. Pretty cool.